CENTCOM recently acknowledged it. During Operation Epic Fury in western Iraq, a KC-10135 aerial refueling aircraft was lost. There are 6 crew members missing. The actual backbone of American air power in the Middle East theater is a $100 million strategic logistics plane. The aircraft that extends every fighter range, makes every strike somewhat feasible, keeps the B-52s in the air, the F-15s hitting, and the air campaign as a whole, operationally sustained, was destroyed in western Iraq during a designated operation that, as to this morning, no American media had been informed of. Epic Fury Operation. The name conveys information that CENTCOM's statement does not, so stop there. Before they are carried out, military operations are named. Planning, approval, a clear goal, a force package, and a schedule are all necessary for calling an operation. A patrol is not what Operation Epic Fury is. This is not your typical refueling mission. In western Iraq, it is referred to as a combat operation. Iraqi parliamentary pressure for an American withdrawal has been growing since 2020 and reached a crisis level when Iranian strikes on Baghdad's airport complex destroyed what remained of American base legitimacy in the country. This is the theater where the Victoria base was destroyed and where Iranian missiles have been hitting American installations. In western Iraq, Operation Epic Fury was underway. It included a KC-135. The KC-135 has vanished. There are 6 Americans missing. Additionally, CENTCOM stated that it is aware of the loss, conscious. CENTCOM is aware that during one of its named missions, one of its own aircraft was lost. The wording of a press release intended to confirm the bare minimum, disclose nothing, and close the information gap surrounding an event whose full scope CENTCOM is obviously not prepared for public description. What do they have to conceal? Let me explain what a KC-135 is and why CENTCOM had to use the language of awareness to handle its loss in western Iraq during a designated operation known as Epic Fury. The most significant aircraft in the U.S. military that is rarely discussed is the KC-135 Stratotanker. Not the most attractive, not the deadliest, but the most crucial. Since 1957, the United States has used KC-135s or their successors in every offensive air action. Without aerial refueling, the entire American concept of global reach, the capacity to project air power from continental U.S. bases to any target on Earth in a matter of hours, would not be feasible. KC-135s were necessary for the B-52s that traveled across the Atlantic to reach this theater. For every combat sortie, they fly in a theater where the distances from base to target exceed their internal fuel range. F-15E and F-16s that were dragged across the ocean behind tankers depend operationally on tanker availability. The KC-135 is not a platform for weaponry. It is the platform that powers every other platform. KC-135s were relocated after the United States removed its tankers from Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia to Europe because the threat situation was too hazardous to keep them there. CENTCOM determined that the most logistically vital aircraft in the theater had to depart Saudi Arabia for their own safety. One of these aircraft, a KC-135, had recently crashed in western Iraq during Operation Epic Fury, killing 6 crew members. Now read CENTCOM's statement and note what it omitted. CENTCOM acknowledged the loss. The aircraft was not said to have been shot down. The airplane crash was not mentioned. It did not state that Iranian fire struck the aircraft. It did not state that militia fire, supported by the IRGC, struck the aircraft. It did not state that there was a mechanical issue with the airplane. The goal of Operation Epic Fury was not stated. The number of planes involved was not stated. It said, aware. The word aware in a statement about a lost aircraft with 6 crew members during a named combat operation is not coincidental in a conflict where CENTCOM has been managing information as meticulously as it has been managing air sorties, where every statement has been parsed for what it confirms and what it forecloses. It's intentional. It is the least amount of public recognition that may be given to a maximum operational event. Last night, or this morning, something important occurred in western Iraq. CENTCOM knows about it. That's intended to satisfy the rest of us. That does not satisfy us. Examine the geography now. Iraq's west. Baghdad is not western Iraq. The Shia heartland, where Iran's political influence is most pervasive and where popular mobilization forces are most advanced, is not western Iraq. The Anbar province, the Sunni heartland, and the desert stretching from Baghdad to the borders with Syria, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia make up western Iraq. The region where the Sunni insurgency was concentrated in 2004, 2005, and 2006, the area where Fallujah and Ramani are located, the area where al-Qaeda in Iraq evolved into ISIS, and the area where ISIS was crushed militarily but never completely eradicated philosophically. Additionally, it is the region next to Syria and the Syrian desert, where militia logistics routes supported by Iran travel from Iran through Iraq into Syria and then to Hezbollah in Lebanon. Under the 2001 AUMF and its 2002 replacement, American Special Operations Forces have been fighting ISIS on this territory. The area where the American military is most forward, exposed, and reliant on air support from aircraft that require KC-135s to get them from the facilities that remain operational following Iran's methodical campaign of base suppression. In that area, a KC-135 supporting Operation Epic Fury went down. The radar post in the interior of Jordan, Muwafaq, a saline air base, was intended to be inaccessible in a battle where Iran has shown it can reach Jordan. Nothing is beyond western Iraq. Iranian ballistic missiles and drones, as well as the IRGC-backed militia network, have been operating in western Iraq for years and have been actively targeting American forces even before this fight officially started. There was no safe airspace where the KC-135 went down. It crashed in disputed airspace over an area where Iranian influence is as pervasive on the ground as it is in the air. Now pose the query that CENTCOM's remark was intended to answer. Was it shot down? The KC-135 is a big aircraft with a modified Boeing 707 airframe that lacks the self-defense systems carried by combat aircraft and is neither quick nor stealthy. It is intended to function in airspace that is permitted, not in disputed airspace over western Iraq during a designated combat operation in an ongoing regional conflict, but rather in airspace that American Air Force has already cleared of danger. The aircraft that requires other aircraft to protect it is the KC-135. The air defense infrastructure protects the aircraft. Iran has been methodically destroying the jet escorts, Patriot batteries, and THAAD radars for weeks. There are 3 THAAD radars missing. The FPS-132 has vanished. The sensor image has deteriorated. There is a shortage of interceptors. 35 waves of Iranian strategic missile fire, the operational demands of a B-52 campaign, the 82nd Airborne Easy ground support requirements, the carrier strike group operations in the Gulf, and every other demand on a force that is concurrently operating in more theaters at a higher tempo than the force posture that started this conflict was sized for, are all placing a strain on the fighter escort availability that would protect a KC-135 operating in western Iraq. During Operation Epic Fury, a KC-135 went down in such setting in western Iraq. Aware. What does aware mean when the aircraft carried 6 crew members and operated in Iraq's most heavily Iranian-influenced territory during a named combat operation that no one outside the command structure had been briefed on? Aware? CENTCOM stated. CENTCOM is aware of what transpired. CENTCOM has evaluated what transpired. It means CENTCOM has a damage assessment and a casualty count and an understanding of the threat that produced the loss. And CENTCOM has decided to convey precisely 1 word of that knowledge to the global and American audience. Now consider the operational ramifications of currently losing a KC-135 in this theater. Europe has already received the tankers. That was the tail. Prince Sultan posed too much risk. The tankers withdrew to bases in Europe. Compared to before the threat environment compelled the redeployment, the air campaign's logistics spine is now operating thousands of miles away from the theater. The KC-35s that left Saudi Arabia have been replaced with KC-135s in Europe. The fighters and B-52s rely on these tankers. They are the planes that allow American Air Force to reach targets in the Gulf theater from bases in Europe. There is no longer one of those planes supporting Operation Epic Fury in western Iraq from wherever it was staged. Every KC-135 loss is more than a single aircraft loss. It is the loss of the missions that would have been supported by airplanes. Each fighter flight that the missing KC-135 would have refueled either doesn't take place or is assisted by a different tanker that was already assigned to another mission. Because the production of a tanker is measured not in its own flights, but in all the sorties it enables, the multiplier effect of losing a tanker is larger than the multiplication effect of losing a strike aircraft. In a theater where the air campaign is already handling the 82nd Airborne's ground support needs, the degraded radar network, the depleted interceptors, the carrier strike group operations, and the B-52 strategic strike missions, the air campaign has simply shrunk. It is unacceptable to be smaller, and 6 crew members, 6 Americans operating a tanker rather than a combat aircraft. The KC-135 crew is not made up of fighter pilots who anticipate being shot at. Tanker crews are highly trained and talented experts whose purpose it is to move fuel in the air, not to fight. They operate in what is meant to be a protected airspace. They operate in what is meant to be a safe rear area under American air defense. During Operation Epic Fury, it was unsafe in western Iraq. It wasn't safe, so 6 individuals have left. CENTCOM knows. Watch the question this loss raises about operational security. Despite CENTCOM's information management, the question is forced into the open by the term Operation Epic Fury. What was the goal of Operation Epic Fury? There are goals for named operations. The moniker Epic Fury does not refer to a defensive operation. Offensive activity is implied by fury. Epic suggests size. Iran has been attacking American bases, blocking the Strait of Hormuz, firing 35 waves of strategic missiles, and offering a deal that Washington has not yet responded to during a named operation in western Iraq during an ongoing regional conflict. In that situation and in that region, a specified operation is neither a standard administrative patrol nor a counter-ISIS mission. It seems that the goal of Operation Epic Fury was to accomplish something important in western Iraq, something that needed help from a KC-135. Iran, or Iranian-backed forces in western Iraq, were in a position to challenge this, something that resulted in the loss of a strategic logistics airplane carrying 6 crew members over disputed territory. What was it? CENTCOM does not claim that the lack of information around Operation Epic Fury is unintentional. It is controlled. It is CENTCOM safeguarding operational security surrounding a recent or current operation whose specifics, if revealed, might reveal information about U.S. goals in western Iraq that the command is not ready to publicly declare. Was it an attack on militia forces in the Syrian border region supported by the IRGC? An Anbar Desert Special Operations raid on a high-value target? A logistical blockade of Iran's supply routes via western Iraq? A mission to provide ground support for the early theater positioning of the 82nd Airborne? Something quite different. All we have is the name. 6 crew members perished aboard a KC-135 during Operation Epic Fury in western Iraq. CENTCOM is aware. The true tale lies in the spaces between those facts. CENTCOM is merely using the word aware to fill up such gaps. In light of everything that has transpired during this conflict, this is the significance of the KC-135 loss. The USS Abraham Lincoln has been affected by this conflict. 3 THAAD radars have been damaged as a result. 67 Americans have died as a result in Kuwait. The Victoria base in Baghdad has been completely destroyed by that. This has used deadly drone enforcement to seal the Hormuz Strait. Oil is now more than $130 as a result. This has destroyed underground networks and 250,000 Iranian soldiers. 35 waves of strategic missile fire at U.S. and Israeli bases have occurred since then. That has resulted in a contract offer from Thrawn, a missing Israeli prime minister, a broken NATO alliance, and talks about the withdrawal of $2 to $3 trillion worth of sovereign wealth funds. A KC-135 crashed in western Iraq that morning during that conflict. CENTCOM said they were aware of 6 additional Americans involved in a named operation that no one had heard of. The American military's ability to cope with the loss of 1 KC-135 and 6 crew members is not at issue. It is able to. In the interim between the events that CENTCOM does publicize in the western Iraqi desert in the dark during a named operation that resulted in the loss of an aircraft that was supposed to be flying in safe airspace and discovered that western Iraq is not safe, the question is what Operation Epic Fury was doing and what its failure tells us about where this war has gone. There's no longer any safety in this theater. Prince Sultan was not safe, which is why the tankers are in Europe. Because the defensive perimeters were unsafe, the radars are in ruins. The Gulf was unsafe, which is why the carrier is burning. When a KC-135 over western Iraq during Operation Epic Fury discovered that the airspace there is also unsafe, at the expense of 6 lives and 1 priceless aircraft, CENTCOM is aware that the relatives of the 6 crew members will be informed. We're still waiting to learn what Epic Fury was attempting to do and whether it succeeded.